Modern operations simply cannot function without SatCom. Command and control, intelligence, everything is depending on SatCom services. Ukraine is the best possible example for that and made it quite crystal clear. Timely, structured SatCom support isn't just helpful, it is essential.
Welcome to EU Defence Declassified, brought to you by the European Defence Agency. This is our podcast where we delve into military technology, strategy, developments and innovation, and everything in between. I'm Robin Emmott, and alongside me is my colleague Liga Lagstinia.
Each episode, we take a closer look at people, projects, and policies shaping the European defense landscape. Today, we are looking at something vast and infinite, space. To keep it grounded, we're focusing on SatCom, or satellite communications. In short, you could say that it's using satellites to link points on Earth.
You may have heard of technologies like Starlink and how crucial satellite communication has become in Ukraine. In this episode, we'll explore EDA's SatCom providing projects, the EU SatCom market and Govsatcom, and we'll also look into the future with IRIS².
It is my pleasure to introduce an expert in the field of space and satellite communication, Heinrich Krispler, project officer responsible for EU SatCom here at EDA.
Hello and a warm welcome also from my side.
And joining us as well is Holger Lueschow, former EDA program manager, SatCom, and currently back at EDA to support Heinrich's team on some specific SatCom topics.
Good afternoon, Robin and Liga. Welcome, and I'm happy to be here.
Let's start with you, Holger. For our listeners to get a clearer picture, could you maybe explain how satellite communications impact our everyday lives and why having, maybe I can say, efficient, robust, and reliable satellite communications are such a game changer for Europe when it comes to defense and also responding to crisis?
Well, Liga, first of all, let me underline that SatCom is not defense specific. And here I want to give just some examples. When you look around the balconies here in Brussels, you see a lot of satellite dishes, and most of them are just established to receive television. That is transmitted via satellite communication, via satellites. So this is, I think, the most popular civil application of SatCom. And so there's absolutely no reason to think satellite communications are something only engineers, astronauts. They touch our everyday lives, as just explained, and most of us don't even notice that. Every time you check your phone, you make a call from a plane or from a cruise ship, or even stream your favorite show, there's SatCom behind. And when a disaster strikes, experience in the last few years has shown how essential satellite communication is to replace actually that what is damaged on the ground after an earthquake or when there was a flooding. And this is where SatCom comes into the play. And then there's defense. Modern military operations run on information. They need to have reliable satellite links as the backbone. Only with this, information superiority can be gained. And we need satellite communication for command and control, for coordinating drones, for telemedicine in the field. And without SatCom, none of that works. So that's why Europe is constantly investing in making these systems more reliable and resilient. And even civilian responders, they can't stay connected no matter what. Civilian responders in this context, I don't mean the civil society, but really those connected to the European security and defense policy. And in short, SatComs aren't just up in space. They are what keeps our planes flying, the ships sailing, and our emergency teams coordinated. And that is where their essence lies. And Europe's defense and crisis response is running smoothly only because of SatCom. So the next time you stream a video, think about it.
And that's great. And Heinrich, tell us specifically, what is EDA's role?
EDA has developed two SatCom provisioning or service provisioning projects. On the one hand side, the EU SatCom market, and on the other hand side, the Govsatcom pooling and sharing project. both projects are complementary as regards their services we provide for the various contributing members. So in this regard, we have a hub of knowledge and coordination. What we do is we gather feedback from the missions, from the operations, from the member states, and we listen to their requirements, and based on their requirements and the assessment of the requirements, we tailor solutions to tackle their demand as regards SatCom services.
Now, as I understand, EDA doesn't actually launch satellites, but I've heard its services described almost like an IKEA catalog. Could you explain what we mean by that?
Yeah, of course, we don't launch any satellites and we don't operate any satellites. Nevertheless, we have a huge service portfolio, and there we list all possible satellite communication services which can be obtained or used by the various contributing members. So with that, we are able to provide on short notice all kinds of satellite communication services to missions operations, to member states, to contributing members, and in particular, we are able to form a lifeline for the soldiers in the field.
EU SatCom market is currently the largest project led by EDA, and together with the Govsatcom demo, they're both often described as kind of a European one-stop shop for satellite services. Could you maybe explain what exactly that means?
Definitely, those two projects are the largest EDA project as regards joint procurement on the one hand side, but also in particular as regards Govsatcom, it's a pooling and sharing project. Imagine just a situation that the mission and operation forces have the need to suddenly have satellite communications deployed to coordinate their logistics, their forces, or just to move critical data around to have command and control in place. They don't have weeks to negotiate with multiple companies. There is no time to do the contracting for those kind of services. And this is exactly where the EDA comes into place. And in particular, what we can provide to the contributing members is that we provide commercial available SatCom services through the EU SatCom market, where they have a price and service catalog in place. And with this price and service catalog, just like an IKEA catalog, they just can point to which kind of service they would like to have. And they just need to issue a request on a web-based platform. We are able to deploy services within a very short time frame, and we can tailor the SatCom services based on the demand of the various contributing members.
So from what you're saying, it sounds like EDA's big advantage is that it allows things to be done much more quickly.
I think the biggest advantage is that the contributing members do not have to have a contract in place with industry, because we do the complete tender process for them. We do the complete administrative support for them. Yeah? And so that would mean they only need to request services either based on the catalog itself, and if a service is not in the catalog, then we tailor a solution based on the requirements. From my point of view, the biggest advantage for the contributing members is that they don't have to pay upfront anything. They only pay for the service they use, and they can choose whatever service is out there. And we offer all kinds of SatCom services through this price and service catalog, meaning that solutions can be deployed fast and in a very robust way.
And does this work out cheaper for member states?
Yeah, definitely. It's cheaper for member states. The project on the one hand side is VAT exempted. And as we are combining the complete demand of 44 contributing members, I think we have the best possible price option out there.
And Holger, we've just been speaking about the EU SatCom market, but you have set up the Govsatcom project here in EDA. What's that, and what's the difference to what Heinrich was just talking about?
Well, Robin, the Govsatcom demo, or let me use the full name, the Govsatcom pooling and sharing demonstration project, that tells a slightly different story. Imagine several countries pooling their satellite resources, meaning bringing the satellite communication link, so the communication, the information down to Earth, and making these resources available for each other. Luxembourg, Spain, Italy, and France, they all fill the pool, not with water, with resources, and these resources aren't available on the commercial market. That's why the project carries the name Govsatcom, Governmental Satellite Communication. They are shared then between member states and EU common security and defense policy users when the need arises. That is real cooperation in European defense. It works, and this project has shown it and is still showing it. It is also a story, of course, of trust and confidence. And one country is literally helping another. I think that should be the future of European defense.
One could say it's also about trust.
Absolutely, Liga. Not only trust, also confidence and cooperation again. That is key. One country is literally helping another, and that can only be done on a trustful basis. Of course, there are clear rules in the project about how this support works, who is responsible for what, and under which conditions. But it works on a very trustful basis, believe me. Building that trust takes time, but it's essential. And once you are at that stage, the project runs alone. Once it's in place, missions can meet again their communication demands exactly when they need it. There are no delays, there is no red tape. And to complete, as those resources come from our member states and not as in the EU SatCom market from industry, in Govsatcom we have higher levels of guaranteed access to resources and also higher levels of security, because everything is controlled by our governments, by our member states. And EDA's role is to coordinate all of this, to make sure the rules are clear, that everyone knows their role and that the setup runs smoothly. It's different from the SatCom market from the resources perspective, as already said, but it's also complementary, and that is essential. With the two projects, they make sure that European defense and security actors have access to the full spectrum of satellite communication services and capabilities they need. And that is why EDA is so important, making SatCom services just a click away.
And I wanted to ask both of you, Holger and Heinrich, could you give us a few concrete examples of where these projects have been used and tell us a bit more about their size?
The EU SatCom market, as already mentioned, is the largest joint procurement project of the agency. Over the last 15 years, the EU SatCom market has grown from a simple idea, so we started in 2009, into a real hub of cooperation. Today it brings together more than 44 contributing members, meaning nearly all EU member states are participating in this project, also EU institutions and organizations, but in particular we also provide services for CSDP, so Common Security and Defense Policy missions and operations.
So could you give an example? Were the services called upon in any particular country or any particular conflict that you could perhaps mention?
Yeah, I think there are several examples we could mention. In particular, beyond Ukraine, where we have support packages in place, the platform provides communications for national and EU diplomatic missions, so also for the European External Action Service. And it supports any kind of operation, peacekeeping, security operations across Africa and the Middle East. In short, it becomes a lifeline for teams on the ground who need fast, reliable communication.
What about the EU maritime mission IRIS² off the coast of Libya?
Yeah, this is one example we are supporting with Govsatcom services because they really do need very robust services. And this is the reason why, based on their requirements, have chosen we provide the complete interconnection, the exchange of necessary data between the force headquarters afloat and the operational headquarters in Rome.
And we're also seeing how critical satellite communications are in Ukraine. But did the start of Russia's war of aggression change the way European countries manage or maybe even prioritize SatCom?
Yeah, definitely. The start of Russia's war of aggression really changed the way European countries manage and prioritize SatCom. Yeah. I think this was a complete game changer. Overnight, it stopped being a long-term capability to think about. It became a frontline operational priority. And this is really important to understand and to note. Countries need to move faster, make sure resources are available and guaranteed, and that critical communication is available whenever they need this kind of communication means. Member states need to invest more into those capabilities and resources, and that is exactly what Europe is also doing currently with various ongoing projects like IRIS², the EU Govsatcom project, but also EDA is providing his share as regards the provisioning of services through the two projects I just mentioned.
Holger, now to you. Heinrich has mentioned that joint procurement helps lower prices. From your experience, how much difference does that make for national defense budgets?
Liga, let me try to apply a slightly different approach to this question. Of course, when we talk about buying satellites together, services together, it's tempting to focus just on the price tag. But pooling demand and buying together can, of course, and is lowering costs for national defense budget. But honestly, the real impact, in my opinion, goes far beyond saving money. Yeah. Setting up and managing these services individually is incredibly resource intensive. You need people, you need expertise, you need teams, you need contracting, you need technical checks, you need continuous monitoring when you set up such systems by yourself. And most member states simply don't have these resources. So joint procurement doesn't just reduce the bill, it removes an entire layer of complexity. And I think this is much more important than the financial aspect only. And otherwise, without going to our projects, these countries would have to handle all of these processes with their resources themselves. And here's the fun part. Once you lower those barriers for access, you don't only save money, you really unlock this access. And suddenly SatCom becomes affordable, manageable, and actually realistic for users who thought it was too expensive or too complicated. We've helped wipe out a lot of old prejudices, like SatCom is only for big nations, it's too technical, it's too slow, or even it's too expensive, yeah? And it won't work for my mission. Once people see what's possible, their mindset shifts and new operational use cases all of a sudden start opening up.
So, Heinrich, what specifically is EDA doing through its satellite communication services for Ukraine?
For Ukraine, the EDA has developed 4 support packages, so it's a very huge package regarding satellite services. On the one hand side, to diversify their satellite services, but on the other hand side, also to make their SatCom services more secure and resilient. So currently EDA is looking towards the member states to search for additional donators in this regard. One of the most, or so far, several member states have already donated various services. For example, Denmark provided satellite communication services and terminals through EDA, helping Ukraine to build their secure communication based on their requirements. I think it's a good example how member states can strengthen their own preparedness and also supporting Ukraine in the same way. Modern operations simply cannot function without SatCom. Command and control, intelligence, everything is depending on SatCom services. Ukraine is the best possible example for that and made it quite crystal clear. Timely, structured SatCom support isn't just helpful, it is essential.
So that actually brings me to my next question, which is that there's been a big discussion about space as a strategic enabler in all other domains, land, sea, and cyber. I wondered, what are the current developments at a European level and how does EDA fit into the picture?
When we speak about satellite communications, we often think defense because we are the European Defense Agency. But the truth really is space is a classical dual-use world. What keeps militaries connected also keeps the civilian world connected. Civil and defense are completely intertwined nowadays in satellite communication and in space. I made that clear already at the beginning. And what's fascinating right now is that a lot of big innovation is actually happening on the civilian side. Massive digitalization, constant demand for connectivity, new commercial constellations popping up. And one of the biggest developments I just want to pick out here is, and Heinrich made already a short reference, that is visible on the European horizon, and people are calling it already Europe's own Starlink. And it is called IRIS². Here, the EU will soon have an own infrastructure for resilience, interconnectivity, and security by satellites. And picture this, hundreds of European satellites cruising in due time, I would say, within the next 5 years in low and medium Earth orbit, between 1,200 and 8,000 kilometers above us, forming a kind of supercharged celestial EU Wi-Fi, so to speak, network built specifically for European needs and European governmental actors' needs, meaning the defense side is a part of this. And it is EU-owned. There is no further relying on external providers. Starlink is not EU-owned, we all know that. So Europe needs to get out of this situation and has an own sovereign, secure and ultra-resilient satellite backbone. It's essential that Europe is saying we are taking our connectivity future into our own hands.
Heinrich, do you have anything to add?
Something what I would like to add here, it's not just about the satellite communication, about new constellations in this regard. I think it's also about access to space. And this is also something where Europe is really catching up, in particular as regards launch capabilities, including micro-launchers. This is also a precondition to build those constellations. And there I'm really optimistic that Europe is really catching up. And I think, in short, the sky is no longer the limit. In space, as on Earth, Europe is ready to act.
Thank you. I really like this optimistic, also future-forward answers. And I feel like that's a great way to conclude this episode on space and satellite communications. A huge thank you to our guests, Heinrich and Holger.
Thank you very much, also from my side, and stay tuned.
Thank you, Liga and Robin. It was a pleasure to be here with you today.
We hope you've enjoyed EU Defence Declassified. If you want to know more, please check our website at eda.europa.eu and, of course, our magazine, European Defence Matters. Thanks for listening and stay tuned for more episodes.